What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to HBCU Pulse Radio. Of course, Randall Barnes in the building, and I have my special guest, Jalen Baker, in the building. He's repping for his alma mater, North Carolina Central, as a university events office manager, and he's been prolific in the alumni space of higher education. So how you doing today, Jalen?
I'm doing outstanding, man. It's a pleasure to be back here with you, Randall. Thanks for having me.
Man, listen, you're the guy to talk to when it comes to homecoming. We did a homecoming show, and I wish you could have been on it, but we got, the student and young alumni views, so we need the OG perspective, the young OG perspective of what we have going on. So first and foremost, let's talk about a couple of your tweets about homecoming that we posted on HBCU Pulse's Instagram. So I want to read these tweets right here. So it's a series of 3 tweets, this first tweet. So you said on October 16, 2021, homecoming, concerts, and planning is not as easy as you think, and the decision-making isn't either. The allocation of money isn't as easy as you think either. We got to stop spreading information that's wrong. It's nothing wrong with voicing that you're upset. However, you have to combat that with facts, and you also got to be willing to sit at the table and come to the meetings to understand why. And you said, lastly, also, artist prices and their availability really play a major part. These artists are not as cheap as you think they are. Artists going up on their price changes with relevance and popularity, and it skyrockets. So I want you to just address that. You said that last year. We posted it, had to pull up the old HBCU post, but I want you to give explanation around that tweet and what you were talking about, just so we all can understand.
Yeah, definitely, man. So, I say time and time again, it's important for us to be okay and be comfortable with expressing how we feel. I think every year, whenever universities start announcing who's coming for homecoming, what the lineup is, sometimes the number one focus is what artists are going to be on campus. And so people are excited, and oftentimes you can't please everybody. There are going to be some people who are disappointed. And so I think it's important, whereas disappointments come, you also understand the amount of work that has to go into these decisions. And it's hard to please everyone where there's so many other things that are against you. From a student perspective, I've been working with homecoming since I was a student. So I've worked at it as a student, and I worked at 3 different institutions professionally, managing and bringing in artists for a homecoming experience. And so I've seen the ins and outs and everything. And so I just want to encourage people, particularly alumni. Students complain, but you also get a lot of alumni who complain, like, come on, like, we did this. Why can't y'all do this? Ticket prices of concerts, artist prices of concerts, the allocation of funds. You never know what the allocation of funds or the priority is for an institution. And the institution may not have $200,000 or $150,000 that they want to allocate towards an artist for 1 week. They may allocate that to the development of their students in other ways. And so just because we may not see them highlight their homecoming with celebrities and artists doesn't mean that institutions don't care about their homecoming experience. It doesn't mean that they may not even have the money. They may have the money, but again, that allocation is that key word, and what the money is going to is very important, because down the line, when students may need something like computers or laptops, but then they saw that the institution spent $300,000 on a homecoming concert, somebody may raise the question, well, where's the priority here? So, that is the beginning. And then you got to think about our artists, man. Everybody's coming off of a COVID time. And so a lot of people weren't able to tour. A lot of people weren't able to really get onto the campuses and really get boots to ground to kind of engage with students and get their notoriety out there. And they lost some money. So now we got to think about how they're picking up on their money. And then it's also a lot easier for people to be super famous now with TikTok, with social media, the Shade Room, Neighborhood Talk, with HBCU Pulse, everybody kind of posting and highlighting different artists and different things, them winning awards. There's so many different things that can up the price of an artist in a matter of a day's time. And I think just as back in the 1940s or 50s, people used to go to school for like $700, and now tuition and fees are like $50,000 at a private institution. It's the same way for artists. Yesterday's price is not today's price. That's one of the funniest statements I've ever heard, but it is one of the realest statements that I've ever heard. And that goes for artists. What was easy for some of us to acquire when we were in undergrad may not be easy for institutions to acquire. And just because we see enrollment numbers going up and so many other different things doesn't mean that they're going to always have the cards in the hand that is dealt in their favor. There are so many different cards in the hand that you're being dealt, from the allocation to the artist availability to the artist price to what other schools have already booked it to what is the social climate on campus. The campus might like a specific type of genre of music or a specific type of artist that nobody who is alumni may know. And that's okay because it's for them primarily. Homecoming is for alumni, but it's also for students. There's a strong portion of it that is directly for our students. And I think people just forget about all of those different layers when they start complaining. And I just hate when people just complain open-ended without an understanding or a means of wanting to understand why things and decisions are made the way they're made.
Exactly. And, you said two things that are important, and I talked about it in our first ideation of this homecoming talk, is that first and foremost in state institutions, some artists, they have criminal records, and state institutions will not let those artists on campus. That's something we had to deal with when I was in SGA at Fort Valley, when I was doing, things with the campus radio station and student events. We can have certain artists come on campus because it's a state campus, number one. And then number two, one thing you brought up as well is that if, for example, if Glorilla is going to North Carolina Central on October the 15th, and then you have another homecoming on October the 15th, guess where Glorilla's not going to be? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's something that's important as well that I don't think people understand. But before we dive deeper into homecoming concerts, I want to talk about homecoming in general, because I talked about this, with Sarah Lee and CDK on our first episode, but I want to talk about it with you. Do you think that we put an overemphasis on the homecoming concert and not on the events around the week? Because I think that if you have an institution that has a lit week of events, I'd rather have that and maybe some artists pop up than I would a homecoming concert. You know what I'm saying? So, like, do you think that we put too much importance into having a lit homecoming concert?
I think that from the social media world, there's a lot of importance that goes into that, from the climate, from the complaining and stuff. But me being someone who's really been boots to ground on both of the student side and the programmer side, as a coordinator, as a director at other institutions, and many other capacities that I've been able to work, the students who work in these student leadership organizations that plan homecoming, they put more emphasis on the planning of their events than just the concert. Yes, the concert is important. It's important to them because, everybody want to say that they had a lit concert. Everybody want to say that they brought the flyest artists for that time to their campus. But at other programs that happen throughout that week, that's just one day out of 6 to 7 days of programming. And I know, just speaking from North Carolina Central University, St. Augustine's University, and even a PWI worked at Guilford College, we made sure that our students put emphasis on the other things too. Now, we've always had great concerts. We've always had some type of experience on the concert aspect, but the other programs, like, they're just as notable. They're just as important. And I think sometimes they get lost in the mix because people are just worried about who's coming to the concert. Well, let me tell you what the coordination looked like this year. Let me tell you what the Ultimate Talent Show or the Choir Ball or what the Step Show, who won the Step Show. Like, there's so many other different things. And now I've seen away from when I was an undergrad, there are a lot of different groups and companies who are sponsoring tours to bring activations to campus. Like DTLR has came to our campus twice now at North Carolina Central University and done an amazing activation where they've kind of developed a full scale experience for the students to be able to take away things. I think homecoming is about the novelties. It's about the family, the fun, the reunion, and the different things that you can feel. On your campus, you should feel like you're at 8 different parts of the world during that 1 week. And I think that, on social media, we see the hype behind the concerts. But for those of us who are boots to the ground and really see what the week is like, there's a lot of emphasis put on the other things that go on. I think some of the highlights here at North Carolina Central, me being an alum, we have an old school stroll off. So we have faculty, staff, and alum come together and have a stroll off the day before the Step Show, which I think is amazing. And I mean, who doesn't want to see their favorite faculty or staff member or an alumni member come back and really kind of hit the stage and go crazy? Or the Step Show, I think at most institutions, the Step Show is probably one of the highest selling events. I've seen it time and time again. And so there's a lot of tradition and an experience. And then honestly, over the concert, over the Step Show, over any of the events, the culmination of homecoming for me is what your yard feels like on that Saturday during the game or after the game. I know you guys have seen a lot of trending things about North Carolina Central and our bowl, what it looks like after the game. To me, that is the culmination of what homecoming really feels like. It's the culmination of seeing everybody come back from 9, 10, 20, 30 years and being in a safe space together with current students and being able to show what that school spirit, what that school pride looks like, being able to just, everybody is your family. At that moment, you have 40, 50, 60,000 family members on one campus at one time. And so I think we put a lot of emphasis on the concept, but there's so many other pieces that are important for me. And I know a lot of people can agree with that.
So that's something that I totally understand. And I will stand by this. I will stand by the fact that I would rather have a lit week of events than a homecoming concert. Because like you said, I think that a lot of folks want to put on for social media. They want to say, oh, Drake came to my campus. You know, Drake came to Sprouts' homecoming. Drake came to my campus. Glorilla came to my campus. And I even was getting DMs where it's like they wanted us to help them get Glorilla or other artists because they think that that's what makes the experience. What makes the homecoming experience is the students and the experience that you have on campus, off campus, doing those homecoming events. That's what you remember the most. And I feel like the concert situation is sort of a popularity contest saying, hey, look who my school had beat that. And I think that helped, that dilutes people's minds about what a lit homecoming is and what an exciting homecoming is. And I think we have to rescue ourselves from that, because a lot of folks are going to look at their homecoming like, oh, this isn't good enough. And that's going to depress their view of the school in general. You know, so I want to talk about this. Because you plan homecomings, man, you planned an amazing homecoming last year at St. Augustine's, and you've had a lot of amazing events in your tenure in higher education. So how does homecoming planning come together? Because I think a lot of us have an idea of it, especially those that aren't in SGA or aren't on their campus activity board for the students. But how does homecoming planning come together from an advisor perspective?
Awesome. And that's a really good question. And foundationally, I think that's important for a lot of people to recognize too. First and foremost, you know, when we're thinking about homecoming planning, we got to start planning early. We already know that homecoming is coming up a year in advance. So the earlier that we're starting, the better that we're able to be logistically happy with it, the better we're able to plan out the logistics and the day-to-day operations of homecoming. I know here at NCCU, there's a strong committee of people who are able to delegate. I definitely want to shout out the student engagement and leadership team, especially the coordinators on our team, like Jamal Searcy. He's an amazing growing professional. The Essence Cox, she's the student activities coordinator here at NCCU. Amazing. Brandon Ratliff, he's over our fraternity and sorority life here and our registered student organizations. Like being here at NCCU again and coming back for a second tenure here and seeing these dynamic professionals really get down and make their pieces of the student experience come to life. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of going back and forth. We're submitting requisitions, you know, trying to figure out how to make a specific budget work. And every institution is different. Every single institution is different. Some institutions only program on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. For some of us, our HBCUs, we see programming from Sunday to Saturday. You know, we see a program every single day. And so when you think about your committee of people that are doing that, it's important for you to plan early, because logistically during that week, you are working 12 plus hours a day every day. And that's already normal for us who work in higher education, but it's like on steroids during homecoming week. Like we're really going the extra mile. We're really pushing forward to try to make sure that we can make this student experience all that it has to be. And you said something earlier, you know, everybody puts the emphasis on these artists coming, but sometimes your favorite artist with the flyest song can't even really perform that well. They haven't even molded their stage presence, you know? And so we do all this work, we pay all this money, and we get into a concert and they may not really be getting the crowd momentum. And then sometimes it could be the person who we least likely to expect to really rock the stage to really have the crowd going. And so I think when you're planning too, you have to do a little bit of research. Start looking up from the concert perspective. When you're thinking about artists, don't just think of names and who has songs, but think about who can perform for 30 to 45 minutes. Who's going to be able to keep a crowd's attention? You know, some people can have 2 hot songs and then can perform 6 songs that don't nobody know. You don't want to bring them to your campus just for the sake of them being the hottest name right now. Think about who has stage presence. Sometimes you got to look at these people live performances and see, are their live performances really lit? And then us as professionals, sometimes other schools may have had somebody a year before or in the past. Talk to them and say, hey, what was your experience like working with X, Y, and Z? Because sometimes, you know, it's not even worth bringing somebody who's kind of horrible backstage. For me, a really big thing that I'm really big on is making sure that the students who planned homecoming have a very important, integral part in meeting the artists that they bring and making sure that they treat them with some respect and dignity, because these are the students who decided to bring you here. If it wasn't for these students, you wouldn't be getting a check right now, you know? So making sure that when you have that artist come to our campus, making sure that they're respectful and understanding our negotiations ahead of time. We're going to do a meet and greet. You're going to take a picture with them. You're going to do an interview with our campus press media team or whatever the case may be. And you're going to do a drop for our school. I think it's super important for when we're building these relationships to make sure that we have these artists do a drop for the institution, make sure they send a video ahead of time to let them know that they're coming, then make sure that they're able to network with our students after they perform or before they perform. Meet and greets, I think, are super crucial because, again, these are the students that brought you to our campus. And so we want to make sure that they are feeling the love, that they are getting the opportunity to meet the artists that they really wanted to come to the campus. And so I think that's super important. But the key to successful planning and homecoming, starting early, delegation, and making sure you have a team. You know, I've worked at some institutions where my homecoming committee might have been 4 people. And then there's some institutions where I've worked at where it's been 40 people. And I think it's rewarding to have worked at multiple institutions to see the diversity of what homecoming planning looks like at different institutions, because you can kind of see what works for some doesn't work for another. I think in my younger days coming into higher education, I thought everything needed to be like it was at HBCU. But when I went to different institutions, I saw that there was a means of operations that worked differently at different schools. And I think that's super important.
It is. And, you know, one thing I want to ask you is this from the student leadership perspective, because I don't think that we really talk about this enough. So we know in the spring that you have SGA elections. Some schools, such as Fort Valley, the SGA leads in the planning of homecoming with the homecoming committee. Then you have certain schools like, you know, you have North Carolina A&T, for example. They have, you know, specific positions that work on homecoming, and SGA is more governance and advocacy, right? So these positions are year-based. Like, they have elections every spring. So it's not like, you know, Joe Biden's in office for 4 years, so he has a whole entire legislative agenda. You know, it's like, hey, it's a year position. So how do student leaders sort of plan this out?
That's a really good question, man. You know, when it comes to choosing artists for a concert for homecoming, you're playing Russian roulette, because you never, ever know what's going to happen. So we talked about K-Camp and Boosie. For us at St. Aug, the day that we announced K-Camp was coming to St. Aug, he dropped an album. So we didn't even realize that was happening when we chose him as an artist, but the cards fell in our favor. And I think that goes back to what I said earlier in the interview. It's all about the cards that you're dealt. I think that the administration for that year should have an integral part in bringing what they want to see, because you only get a year in most cases. Some people may get 2, but you get a year. You really get a year and you get 1 shot to make your legacy known. And so with that, you know, you're playing Russian roulette. And that goes back to when you're choosing your artist, sometimes you got to choose an artist, especially like if you have the ability, or if you're lucky enough to be able to book them in June, July, or August. You're choosing an artist for November, October, November. You never really know what can happen. Sometimes it's good to look ahead and see who's planning on dropping an album later in the year, if that information is leaked out, or who has the longevity to get to that point. And then sometimes people may not be able to choose their artist until the 9th hour. And that, you know, can help you choose what's favorable for right now. But when you're planning in advance, it's like playing Russian roulette. Unfortunately, nobody knows what cards are going to be dealt for them and what the hand is going to be that they're going to have to play. And so it's really a situation where you got to be on your P's and Q's at all times. If you got a list, from the time that you know you want to run for something, you should be thinking about, if I know I want to be in terms of student activities, in terms of a president or whatever, these are the artists that I'm already thinking about that I want to bring and advocate for to come to my institution. This is my 2nd tier list. Here's my 3rd tier list. Because you got to consider, you don't know how much they cost. You don't know what their availability is, and you don't know what your budget is going to be allocated in. And so you got to think about all of the possible outcomes so that you can think about what could be favorable in any situation. Because there's a lot of times that people really choose an artist and they think that this is going to be somebody cheap. I might say, oh yeah, Glorilla, she just came out. She probably 15 or 20K right now. Glorilla up there, bro. Glorilla is up there right now. You know, she's getting more and more notoriety. You know, I seldom ever listen to the radio, but I cut on the radio the other day, and I was like, every time I turn on the radio, I hear 1 or 2 Glorilla songs, and then maybe 2 other songs, and they just play it all day. Like, this is her moment. This is her time. That may not be the case next year. You know, you never know. It could be a new person. It could be somebody else who just popped up out of nowhere. And so it's really playing Russian roulette. You really don't know what is the best way to go about it. You just kind of have to make sure that you can have multiple ideas of how you can come with an outcome.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And, you know, what I'll say is that what you said about having that plan in place is the right thing to do. So let's sort of end off on concerts, and let's talk about something that I've heard so much in my time at Fort Valley. And I've heard it for a lot of different institutions, and, you know, working with SGA presidents in the past, you know, and just listening around, you know, to the HBCU community. There's a lot of smaller institutions that look at North Carolina A&T and FAMU and Howard and look at, you know, the star power that they command. And they say, why can't our school have that? And, you know, they look at, you know, their school, which is significantly smaller, 2,000, 3,000 students, saying that we pale in comparison to those schools because we're not getting those celebrities. We're not having those big grandiose events, you know, and it makes it like, man, we're small. So what I always try to say is that, that like the misconception that we can bring Drake to campus, that we can bring these big artists to campus without sponsors, without alumni donorship, without trying to cut a deal with a promoter. Like that's impossible, and we should just enjoy our experience for what it is. And I spoke with CDK about that in the first episode. Should we tamper our expectations? But you're a higher education, professional, and you plan concerts before and you planned events before. So why can't schools such as my HBCU Fort Valley, or like other smaller institutions like St. Augustine's, for example, why can't we get Drake? Why can't we get Lil Baby? Like why?
But I think that's a misconception, because you got to think about it. And I was going to reference St. Augustine's University. We have roughly 1,000 to 1,200 students. That's not a large institution. That's a very small institution. I brought K Camp and Boosie. Those are not small names. Those are relevant names that were still popping in that time. A Drake is oftentimes probably not even paid for when he pops up on a certain college campus. It might be a relationship. I think any of these institutions can foster relationships with people, but you got to have the right people. You got to have the right alumni to get into these relationships and make sure that they're putting your name in the room. I think one of the greatest things that North Carolina A&T or Howard or Spelman or Morehouse has is the alumni. They make sure that their alumni are putting their names in the right places. And that is what benefits that institution more than what the allocation of their budget is, more than what resources they have on campus. They're constantly getting support. They're constantly getting recognition because their name is being spoken in rooms that the institution itself is not even in. Because they have alumni who are advocating for the behalf of their institution and making sure that they're building those relationships and those connections for those Drakes to pop up, for those Lil Babies to come up, or for those random artists to just say, oh, I'm gonna come do a favor because I know my boy performing here tonight, And then also, you got schools like in the AUC that are in a music district of Atlanta, So they already have that strong sense of, everybody's already down here. We got X, Y, and Z performing. Why don't you come by? This is going to make my experience a little better. The artists may be we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. The artists may be setting up some arrangements amongst themselves. You just never really know. But I think that a relationship with our alumni, making sure that we get our institutions' names out, marketing and the story that we're telling is the most important thing. From the student activities pages to the university page to the students themselves page. Everybody has a piece in telling the story of what their school looks like. The students are more important now than they have been in the past, simply because they can tell the story on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, before the institution can even get the story out. And they can paint the picture of what their institution looks like. A lot of people are making a decision on what school to go to, not because they're going to college fairs, because they're seeing a lit school and a lit thing from the HBCU Pulse. They're seeing the great things that HBCUs Pulse is posting about HBCUs. And that's why I commend your platform, because you do a great job of highlighting not just your alma mater, not just your favorite institution, but all institutions. And I think that's important because you play an integral part in a lot of students making a decision of what college they want to go to.
Yeah, and I think that is important because the experience is, I believe, what makes HBCUs different. You have institutions of higher learning that, they can teach you how to, to be on the radio. They can teach you how to do brain surgery, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, what makes us different is our specific experience on campus, the Greek life, the student experience, the homecoming experience. That's what makes us different. And I believe that, we're not promoting that well enough in certain aspects. And I think that's where, HBCU Pulse and platforms such as ours that are in the community, that's where we have to step up and do it in our own way. And the students also have to do it in their own way. And I have a whole entire theory about Drake popping up at Spell House, because I think that was low-key a part of the rollout. I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But I want to ask this one last question before we let you go. So do you think our expectations should change? And I always use my institution, Fort Valley, because these were conversations we were having when I was in SGA of, hey, I look at what Clark Atlanta's having. I look at FAMU. I look at North Carolina A&T, and they're having these grand desk artists. Why can't we? And my argument was always this. Should we change our expectation? I was saying change your expectation. And then once you change your expectation, you'll look at this experience through a different lens. So do you think that in general, for institutions that don't have that budget, that don't have those connects, that aren't in areas such as Atlanta that can get those artists that live there, should we just change our expectations so we can enjoy the experience better?
I think that your expectations should fit your campus. So I wouldn't say change your expectation, but I say don't base your expectation on another campus. If you're basing your expectation because you see what's happening at North Carolina Central University or North Carolina A&T, but you're at another institution, your expectation shouldn't be set on that. I believe that NCCU is the greatest homecoming in the world because of my expectation of what my campus looks like. Whereas somebody may feel the same about a Winston-Salem State University or Shaw University, St. Augustine's University, Elizabeth City State, Fayetteville State, and so on and so forth. Like, their expectation needs to be set on their campus and not anybody else's experience. Because the moment that we start living for anybody else's experience, we're going to dim our own experience, and we're not going to see the value and what is the monument of our experience. So don't change your expectation necessarily, but make your expectation based off of you and your campus experience.
So, Jalen, it was amazing speaking to you, man. I'm already knowing you have so many amazing things that you're doing in North Carolina Central, and you busy, so you booked and busy, man. So I appreciate you for coming on. So last thing, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, man, you can find me on all social medias at President Jalen. That's President Jalen. You can also find me on LinkedIn for those professionals at Jalen Reginald Baker. You know, we in the professional world now. I got to throw the LinkedIn out there and connect with people. But it was a pleasure to talk to you, Randall, man. I love you guys. There's always equal pride from my side. North Carolina Central University, I'm going to always represent all day, every day. Special shout out to St. Augustine University because, of course, they hold a special place in my heart, too.
Yeah, and hey, LinkedIn is lit. I know LinkedIn is real lit. You got to drop that LinkedIn. Hey, Randall Barnes on LinkedIn, but we got another segment. So stay tuned. You're listening to HBCU Post Radio.